Welcome to Luna, the laterally universal new archives. This is our first podcast, an episode on Descartes' Discourse on Method. I'm Ol.
And I'm Val.
And we both fully identify with Descartes with the crisis he has as a young guy just after he comes out of his education.
Yeah, particularly for those who have reached the end of this very long journey, an end which is not really an end, for those who have gone on to higher study, going on to doing a PhD and things like that.
The PhD that never ends.
The PhD that never ends.
The Viva that never happened.
No. The constant deferral through time and place.
Yet another deadline.
Yeah.
Distant off in the horizon of the job that maybe you're going to get with the PhD.
I mean, in this job market...
What job market?
Yeah, the job market.
There is no job market.
Well, no. Well, I mean, with the oversaturation of the crisis of education in this particular historical juncture, if I can say it like that, is that there's too many PhDs. Everyone's educated now.
Yeah, but why are they there in the first place? I mean, somebody made them a promise. Somebody said, you do a PhD, there's a point to it. Somebody told them, right?
Somebody. And this is precisely what Descartes is going to be interrogating, right? It's who told me that this was the way forward? You know, I've spent all this time, I've acquired all of this knowledge, but it was under it was a promise that at the end of the pathway, you can get a job in the field that you studied for.
Well, he says, he sets the bar very high. To be honest, he says, what did I want from my education? I went to the best college in Europe. La Flèche, the Jesuit college. There was nothing better, right? I was privileged. And not only that, but I did really well. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't a bad student.
I participated. I put my hand up.
That's right. I did the reading.
Yeah. Every single one.
Exactly. And what does he get at the end of it? Nothing. He says, what I wanted was clear and certain knowledge of all that is useful in this life. Val, is that what you got from doing your PhD?
Well... that is a very good question. Was it useful? Maybe perhaps in cultivating my own kind of interest, but is it useful on a kind of job market? Not very much. I feel that, this is this crisis of education that Descartes is going to be trying to deal with is a decision that he makes. Maybe the knowledge that he had acquired would have been useful if he had wanted to just follow a given path. The one that was set out. You go to the best college in Europe, and then you advance, become a public servant or something like that. Put your knowledge to good use. But Descartes seems like he wanted to take a different path, and all of the knowledge that he had acquired was not as clear and as certain for the path that he wanted to go on.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's precisely it. Because he does actually recognize that some of these things that he's been studying poetry, he's been studying ancient moral philosophy, he's been studying theology, he's been studying rhetoric and oratory as well. He recognizes that they do have a little bit of usefulness in society as it stands, but he still rejects all of them. He sees them, in his eyes, for what he actually wants, they are completely useless because they're contradictory.
And this, I suppose, is one of the internal tensions of philosophy, because as he says in the discourse, when I cast a philosophical eye upon the various activities and undertakings of mankind, there were almost none which I do not consider vain and useless, right? So he's kind of taking this philosophical perspective on all of the different disciplines that he kind of learns within the university, right? And so he's calling into question, well, what is their actual utility?
But how can he say this kind of thing? Back then, sure, there were midwives. Yeah. How can you say what a midwife does is vain and useless? There were carpenters. Yeah. Carpenter builds you your house. How can you say what the carpenter does is vain and useless?
Well, only a philosopher could say what the carpenter says is vain and useless. But perhaps but I suppose what his interest is there's not so much of a critical eye, or at least in his opinion, of the disciplines don't ask themselves the question of what they're doing in the first place. What is their utility? For a carpenter, the utility of a table, for example, is immediate, right?
Sure.
But we are not considering what is the nature of a table. What position does it have in the world? How do I know that it's there or not. And of course, one of the things that he wants to try and address and reconcile in I suppose his own relationship to his education is that, okay, yes, I've gone to this elite college, but still at the level of all of these supposed masters, the holders of institutional knowledge, why are there variations in what they are teaching me? Why do they hold different perspectives on each of these different disciplines, right?
Yeah, exactly. He says this. He says exactly the same thing that Kant says, centuries after him, which is that you take any subject whatsoever, and you will find philosophers who have held the opposite opinion about that subject, contradictory opinions. And he says there's multiplicity of opinions on, I don't know, say the infinite divisibility of time and space. Or whether or not it actually consists of little building blocks. Like take an impossible question like that. He says there are so many different opinions. One of them's got to be true, or none of them are true. How do we find which one is true?
Yeah. Exactly, and I think this is one of the, I suppose, where philosophy as a discipline becomes quite interesting, is precisely being able to pose this question. Because one thing I have encountered very frequently, particularly having just finished a PhD, and people asking me, what is the purpose of your education? What is philosophy? Philosophy just seems like this rhetorical tool where you pose questions, you never create answers. Why don't you go study, if you're so interested in knowledge, why don't you study one of the hard sciences?
Sure.
Why don't you go and study, physics? And the thing that I always respond is I say, is physics a complete discipline? Why are there no variations in physics in the same way that there are variations in every other kind of discipline? It's not a complete system of knowledge. That's why we're still able to study it, and there's new things to discover all the time. There are all these variations in how we understand the world around us, and particularly through, when you look at the history of physics as a discipline, there have been very precise moments of rupture, right? The history of physics is not just the repetition of a singular thing. It's a discipline that invites, further interrogation, and this is what Descartes is trying to do. How do we find a path through all these variations in these opinions?
But that's precisely what he actually helps invent or found. Is the new physics as precisely a collective enterprise in which different people can participate in the search for truth, in the development of a theory, in the testing of a theory, and eventually in, I guess, the occurrence of an epistemological break. But what's completely different here is that he's not going to accept philosophy as a collective enterprise.
No.
Like he wants to... the fundamental thing that struck me when I was reading this is he is so alone. Like he says... I have no master. Yeah. I did not encounter any teacher in this fantastic education that I have. I didn't encounter one teacher who I actually trusted.
Yeah. And I suppose this is... where the grounding of, exactly, the method that he's going to be trying to use, where, I suppose he does encounter one master in the sense of there is a master knowledge that is dominating scholastic theology, university life at that particular time, but he's going to reject the master himself, right? So Aristotle who's dominating, basically all of our knowledge about the universe, including, how we understand physics and everything, along those lines of Aristotelian thought. But there's a profound solitude within Descartes' approach to what of the problem he's going to be trying to tackle here, right?
But it's a self-programmed solitude, because basically what does he do? He diagnoses all these contradictions by saying the problem with the knowledge that I've been taught, and the problem for all of us, he actually says, all of us, once upon a time we were children. And as children, we basically just drank in our parents' opinions, our teachers' opinions. And because there were so many different people who were just shoving their opinions down our throat, we get this completely heteroclite, inconsistent mass of knowledge in us, and we're supposed to base our lives on that and make choices on the basis of this, right? And what he actually says, his solution is, right, it's a mess, it's inconsistent because it consists of so many different people's opinions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it all out. He says, I am going to jettison, I am going to abandon every single opinion. And in doing that, because the opinions come from other people, what is he doing? He's jettisoning and abandoning everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody who ever had something to say
No.
to Rene. He's basically saying, screw you.
No.
That's enough. I'm done.
Not having a bar of it. Yeah. But what a privileged kind of position to be able to take, right?
Exactly.
This kind of privileged education. He's only able to arrive at this conclusion after he has gone through the system of education, right? He's gone, yeah, okay, I've acquired all of your knowledge, and now I'm going to throw it all away. I'm going to call it all into doubt. But he's already gotten all of the fruits of this kind of education. He's only able to make this kind of gesture precisely at the end. You know, perhaps a more radical thing for him to have done is say, I'm not even going to enter into it, right? It's almost like he's taking the tools and trying to that he acquired through his education and turning it back against the very thing that provided him this education in the first place.
Who's stopping him from becoming a hermit? Who's stopping him from being Zarathustra? He can walk up the mountain.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Don't write a book about it. You know, you could have just gone, not told anyone about it.
But why? Why does he write this book? He keeps saying, he says, "Look, I'm not trying to teach everybody the method that everybody's supposed to follow, right? Please don't imitate what I'm doing here. This is just for me."
Yeah.
But that's completely insane. Like, you're writing a book; it's meant to be read by other people. What are they supposed to do? Just ignore it?
And a book that he wrote in French precisely for the reasons to make it more accessible to the masses, right? Rather than in Latin, you know.
But he says it's dangerous for the masses to undertake this activity of getting rid of all their opinions, because some of their opinions, of course, are religious opinions.
Yes.
That there is one God.
Yes.
That the Son of God was called Jesus.
Yes.
That he said a few things that are supposed to guide how we... I mean, those are opinions. Is he not getting rid of those opinions as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, this is one of the things that is so striking about, you know, this book. You know, it's a public address and filled with caveats. You know, he's always trying to it's almost like he's covering his ass at every step of the way, where he says, yeah, I've got this method, you're not obliged to follow it.
Val, I'm sorry, I can see his ass. His ass is poking out all over the place. There is no covering this ass, right? Because, you know, he says, I'm just trying this out for myself, but be careful. Please don't do this at home. And what's more, when he gives us a summary of the meditations, which we'll talk about next episode, it's a dumbed down summary.
Oh, yeah.
It's a summary for the vulgar.
It's a simple
he doesn't even go as hardcore as he does in the real Latin text.
Oh, yeah. Not even close. Yeah. And particularly, in all the kind of... Yeah, he gives us a very baby version of his metaphysics in part 4 of the discourse, right? You know.
Well, talking of babies, I reckon he's thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Right? He's got rid of all of his opinions.
Yeah.
It still seems to me that what he's saying is grammatical. Yes. It still seems to me that he's spelling correctly.
Yeah.
It still seems to me that he knows what his pen is and what the paper is and how to get the goddamn book printed and that, you know, anyway. Yeah. So there's a lot that he's not chucking out. This is a bit convenient.
Yeah, it is very convenient for him. And of course, you know, as we're going to see a little bit later in the discourse, you know, he does have this provisional morality. He says there's things about the world that I just have to accept to be able to act practically within it. But yeah, it seems like he's picking and choosing very much what bits of knowledge that he actually wants to call into question, right?
Well, it's just his knowledge. He says, my plan has never gone beyond trying to reform my own thoughts and construct them upon a foundation which is all my own.
Yeah.
Does this not sound slightly individualistic?
Well, exactly. Keep it to yourself. You know, just go and do that. Don't write a book about it. Why do I want to hear about it? Is
this not the birth of bourgeois individualism right here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Then that is. I mean, you can blame Descartes for many of our modern foibles, but one of them is exactly this creation of the individual rational subject that is going to be used so lovingly by, you know, the political economists, the bourgeois political economists of the 18th and 19th century, right? But surely there must be something else going on here. You know, this can't just be pure individualism. He's written a book. It's an address to people. He's written it in French, not in Latin. It is an address to a collective. I think he's covering his ass because he doesn't want to get burnt at the stake by saying anything too heretical.
That's right. Bruno got burnt at the stake.
Exactly.
He got burnt at the stake for sure.
Galileo came with
Galileo had to recant.
Yeah. So he's responding to his historical moment at the same time.
Well, he says that. He actually says, look, I've got this whole treatise called The World, and I'm deciding not to publish it because I just heard what happened to Galileo.
Exactly. So he's well aware. He's well aware that there are limits to the things that he can cast into doubt. So I think he's there's something very kind of I don't even want to call it subtext, but there is an act, there's a gesture that he's responding to his historical moment under the guise of acting in accordance with the I suppose whatever you want, the very real threat of a church that burns heretics.
Okay. So let's be nice. Let's be nice. Right. He doesn't want to get burnt at the stake. Fair enough. He's having a crisis. He's young. His education has turned out to be useless. He wants something solid. What's his solution, Val? What does he decide to do?
Well, he decides to use his lovely inheritance money to go on a nice little road trip across Europe
with his valet.
with his valet.
Would you like to have a valet when you go on a road trip?
Val would like a valet. It makes time.
I think I'll have a butler myself.
Yeah,
I like breakfast. Yeah.
Because how else would Rene find all that time to write if he didn't have somebody cooking for him, pressing his shirts, things like that, carrying his bags?
Funny you should ask. I'm quite interested in the history of the sandwich, right?
Yeah?
It was a lord who actually invented the sandwich.
Yes.
And I'm pretty goddamn sure back then there were no sandwiches.
No.
So poor Rene, he wanted to eat properly. He needed to have a full-on meal, right? He needed somebody to cook it for him.
Yeah. And, that's a very hard thing to do for somebody who has, gone through an elite university and they've spent all their time having, basically more or less all of their material needs catered towards them. And also, being able to go out on a road trip, across Europe for how many years was it all?
9 years.
9 years.
That's a pretty good road trip.
Yeah, you got to have a bit of coin tucked away for that.
All right. I could afford one gap year myself. One gap year because I was earning £3 an hour in London.
Hey, I did my gap year, but I paid for that off the sweat of my brow. There's no inheritance here.
Yeah, so there he is. He decides to go off for 9 years, more or less.
Yeah.
And this is how I put it. I really like this passage. This is how he says. He says, this is how he puts it. As soon as I was old enough to emerge from the control of my teachers, I entirely abandoned my literary studies, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that which could be found in myself or else in the great book of the world. I spent the rest of my youth travelling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of diverse temperaments, testing myself in the situations which fortune offered me, and at all times reflecting on whatever came my way so as to derive some profit from it.
What a beautiful statement, right? How old he's 23 at this point. He's finally mature enough to break with the control of his teachers. He's finally ready to be able to start posing questions about the world. But I think there's a question of order here, right? Because, obviously we both grew up in Australia. You take your gap year before you go and study, right?
That's right.
Descartes has acquired all of this knowledge and then seeks to throw out the knowledge that he has acquired through the university, through this road trip. But I think all of that accumulated institutional knowledge may have stuck in a few different places, right?
Oh, yeah. He's got a real addiction to some of the Aristotelian categories. He will not let go of substance, for example.
No.
But I think you're right. There is a question of order because most of us, my daughter, for example, she's talking about going on a gap year. And I said, fine, that's good. You'll learn some real values. I want you in the workplace and you're going to get organised. And then you're going to see, like I did, that you do need a university education because, for Christ's sake, you're not going to survive earning £3 an hour in some job washing up dishes, right? But he's got it topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
He knew what the value of an education is.
Yeah.
He throws the entire education in the garbage bin.
Yeah.
And then he thinks he can replace it with a little bit of self-inquiry.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to just like find out what's going on in my
Yeah.
mind, right? Most of the time, Val, I don't know about you, but I do not want to know what's going on in my
Oh
mind.
no, I've absolutely. That's the place where I spend the least amount of time.
Exactly. It's most uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the question of the road trip is always a quite a fascinating one, right? Because it seems very much at first blush one of the most banal, insufferable things that you could ever have a conversation with somebody about. They go on the trip and they go on this long road trip, and the truth was inside themselves the whole time. You know, how painful is it when you have conversations with people like that? You went out, you looked at the book of the world, and then your one conclusion was actually the truth was within me the entire time.
For sure, there are people. So I met people who were traveling all the time when I was in London, and there were guys who basically boasted about the fact that if they bought a book and they read it, then they chuck it in the bin or give it to somebody else. They never collected any books, which I thought was insane.
Yeah.
All they took with them was a towel, basically, and they also said if you travelled in Europe during the summer, you didn't even need a towel because you just dry on the beach, right?
Yep.
And so these people, as far as I could see, were learning nothing other than how to live the most comfortable, carefree kind of life anyway, which you already knew if you were a couch potato playing a video game on a sofa. It was kind of the same thing. But he actually, I mean, what I find great about Descartes is that he's not trying to find himself because, and this is what rescues him from that earlier charge. I think I was deeply unfair accusing him of being the origin of all bourgeois individualism, because it's not about discovering the individual, because he doesn't talk that much about his personality or whether he likes stamp collecting or whether he likes spotting trains or whatever.
No.
What he does is he remains true to this quest to discover true knowledge. And he says, he's actually honest enough to say, look, I'm going on a road trip, but travel itself is not enough, because there are people who travel too much, and they travel so much they get obsessed about other people's cultures. And when they come back, they can't even live at home or adapt to being at home because they're so used to exoticism.
Yeah.
Right?
And they feel that they're perpetually absent from the place that they're in. There's a real problem of kind of presence, right? And at a certain point in time, unless you have, sort of unlimited money in this particular respect, you do have to go home at some particular point, right? And the idea that knowledge is always found elsewhere, in some respects, denigrates your relationship to the place that you're in, right? And that's one of the problems he himself is going to grapple with when he tries to sit down in one place, set up shop, and write this method, following it, right? Following this long road trip.
But where does he set up shop? This is the thing, right? Yeah. So there are two moments, right? Two moments in which he holds up in a cozy cottage, which is heated by this fabulous stove, which doesn't lead to there being all kinds of smoke inside the room. So
luxury.
Exactly. And it's so, like, not even his biographers can work out where the second stove was, where he actually does the meditations.
Yep.
The first one, it's November, it's the winter of 1619. He's supposed to be near Neuburg somewhere. That's what Genevieve Rhodus Lewis reckons, right? And he has a dream, Val.
He has a dream. I've heard it's quite a dream.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
been reported. I think it wasn't just one dream.
There are winds involved.
Yeah.
There are thunderclaps
There's
involved.
some kind of melon at some point.
There's a melon, man.
Is he the melon?
He's limping.
Yeah, he's limping. There's a fierce wind.
Blowing him towards a college.
Yeah.
Which has a church in it.
Very convenient.
He's blown past a man that he doesn't say hello to, one of his acquaintances.
But knows him. When he wakes up from the first dream, he suspects that this is the work of the evil genie.
That's right. Who we're going to meet again in the meditations.
Yes.
So, yeah, and these dreams about melons and winds and having like a weakness in your right side and like hobbling along on your left side and being blown towards a church.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be the inspiration for the method.
Yeah. Which calls into, this is something we're going to be discussing, but the status of the epistemological status of dreams, right, undergoes some very interesting kind of changes as Descartes' system goes along, right? But there's this kind of, the first two dreams seem to be these kind of like terrifying fever dreams, and then once he gets to the third one, there seems to be this clearer kind of directive, right? But it's kind of it's fascinating that the inspiration for this entire method is it follows.
It's a fever dream.
It's a fever dream. He's lost his mind.
Do you know what Carolyn Merchant accuses Descartes of, Val? Do you know what he does, according to Carolyn Merchant?
Just making stuff up.
No, he kills nature.
He kills. Yes.
Descartes is the death of nature.
Oh, that is a very strong charge.
He turns nature into an extendable thing, an object that can be quantified and measured. It has no internal orientation or goal or purpose. There is no striving occurring in it. Animals might as well be machines. So nature it's had its spirit ripped out from it, Val.
Okay. So Descartes kills nature the way that nature kills God. Is that right?
That's right. Descartes kills nature, and it all came out of a fever dream.
Well, thanks a lot. Okay.
What about the melon?
I know. What about the melon? Well,
the melon's natural.
I think this is what's interesting in where Baillet makes this little caveat when he's recounting the dream, at least in the French edition of Discourse on the Method. And Baillet says there were accusations that Descartes had perhaps been drinking the night before this fever dream. But Descartes he assures us that he did not get on the sauce. He had not been drinking the night before. He had spent the day in complete sobriety, Scout's honor.
Val, that is one of the trippiest dreams I've ever read.
Yeah.
And I will bet my horse that he was on the sauce.
Oh,
there is no way. Everybody was drinking that night anyway.
100%. Well, yeah, and what do you mean? Yeah, are you going to try and tell me that Descartes was pure and sober in his heart? And also he's just been backpacking for 9 years. I don't know anyone else who's gone backpacking, but I'm pretty sure you don't do it sober, particularly through Europe. But there's one thing,
it's the first rule of his provisional morality.
Exactly.
Adopt the customs and mores
Yep.
of the place where you are.
Yeah,
if you're in Rome, do as the Romans do.
There's not one place in Europe, granted I have not seen them all, but there's not one place where they do not drink.
Well, that's one of the reasons I came here.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, speaking about this road trip, there's one kind of detail that I can't, historical omission, if you will, that I can't wrap my head around, which is there's a war going on. There's a massive war going on while he's...
There, as far as I can work out, there were like two wars going on. First of all was a war between Holland and Spain. Yeah. And then the 30-year war starts up as well.
And he's just going about his business with his valet, just traversing the... Is this the Kantian Kampfplatz? He's literally going across the battlefield of Europe to try and establish his philosophy.
Look, he's basically just imitating Socrates. We know that Socrates, it's in the middle of a battle, just says, hang on, stop.
Wait.
Up later, I'll fight you later. I've just got to figure out this philosophical problem in my head.
Just hold
and he
up.
just stops and he closes his eye and he thinks. Right?
Beautiful.
So Rene, he actually enrolls in the army. He enrolls in Prince Maurice of Nassau, the Dutch prince. He enrolls in his army for a while. And apparently he got a little bit alarmed at the kind of debauchery that the soldiers were engaging in.
I thought he was supposed to follow the customs of wherever he was.
Well, he did. That's why it was so alarming.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then later on, he joins the Bavarian army as well, once the 30-year war has started, when a couple of officials got tossed out of a window in Prague.
Okay. So he's a bit of a turncoat, a bit of an army leaver. I don't know. It feels like he's playing both sides, so he comes out on top either way, right?
Well, he's abandoning lots of things. What can I say, Val? He's abandoning opinions. He's abandoning armies.
Yeah. Look, this is supposed to be the great book of the world. You got to try different things out in different ways.
What about his parents?
Who cares?
Does Descartes have parents?
If he does, he never mentions them. He never mentions concern for anyone. Well, I suppose this is one of the odd things about these allegedly kind of autobiographical details. They don't contain a lot of details about his kind of life. They seem to just be like setting some odd stage for him to go into this philosophical, method. But
this is the thing. Like, this is one of the, along with Augustine, this is one of the great texts in philosophy where somebody's actually speaking to us from the heart in the first person, saying, this is the history of my mind, my spirit. This is how I came to the position that I'm at today. Yeah. He's speaking in the first person. It's autobiographical. Yeah. What about friendship? What about his friends? Where have they gone?
What about his lovers? we all have.
Did he have lovers?
I would assume so, given how many love letters he was writing. He seemed to have a thing for royalty.
Princess Elizabeth.
There's Elizabeth,
Queen
first.
Catherine.
I know. This is what's. Surely he must have had lovers at some kind of point in this story, but none of them appear. There's love only appears in the correspondence, in the letters, but there's no love in Descartes' philosophy until he writes Passions of the Soul.
Yeah, well, that's where everything changes,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But one thing, just one point, there's this great friend of his that he meets. I don't know if you've seen, it's a little bit Goodwill Hunting, but basically, he's in Amsterdam, and somebody, because this is what you do in Amsterdam, has posted a mathematical problem, a challenge, up on a post, right? And there's young Rene. He wanders up and he's stroking his beard and he's thinking, how can I figure this out? Another bloke comes along and says, oh, you're trying to figure this out, are you?
Yeah.
My name's Isaac Beekman. Nice to meet you.
Oh,
I'm into mathematics as well.
Yeah.
Let's have a chat. And there starts one of the most influential friendships ever. Because who shows the young Descartes that you can do physics through mathematics but Isaac Beekman? He's inspired by Beekman.
Yeah. And yet he doesn't really speak much about these kind of influences, these people. For somebody who's gone out into the book of the world, he doesn't talk about really any of the people he actually meets.
Poor Isaac, Val.
Poor Isaac.
Poor Isaac.
Can you imagine? It's
abandoned.
It's like when you show a friend of yours, their new favorite band. Or you show them a bit of music, and there's just no recognition that it was somebody showed this to me.
I mean, you have to accept. I mean, this happened to me, right? You have to accept, you show somebody something. I showed my brother how to play a guitar.
Yeah.
I was rubbish, but I knew how to read music.
Yep.
I showed him how to play guitar. He went way past me. He became a musician. He had a career.
Sometimes, we're the little spark that gets the passions going in somebody else. And, we can't take all the credit for that, but a passing mention, a liner note, just something, a little acknowledgement somewhere would be nice.
My guitar was used in my brother's band. It had a whole career.
Well,
it starred on many tracks, right?
Well,
so I felt that was acknowledgement enough.
Okay, well that's but maybe for other people who feel more hard done by a lack of recognition and acknowledgement.
You know what I think it is? I think Descartes, he can't handle anybody who's not methodical.
Yeah.
As methodical as he is, right? So this is his second solution. This is what I don't get. It's his solution to his existential crisis, right, is the road trip. But at the same time, he says he goes on the road trip in order to develop his method. So he's looking at other people's customs. He's thinking they really believe in their customs. They think that the way they live their life is normal. But for me, it seems really odd. That means that the way I lead my life, which I think is normal, well, they might think that it's odd. Well, that means that custom and example are all useless as a foundation of knowledge.
Yeah.
So I've got to have a method. What does he do? He comes up with a 4-point method.
Exactly. And so there's almost a proto-critique of cultural relativism there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He says you can be as relative as you want. It doesn't matter. It's not going to solve you any mathematical problems.
No, we're not going to find any kind of common ground between us by just accepting that there are just differences in cultures that are irreconcilable. And of course we can accept that is the case. But for Descartes, he's not having that. He says, no, we need to find a way to navigate all of these differences to try and find something, or maybe this is me being perhaps too charitable with Descartes, to find a common ground between different customs and cultures.
Well, this is another point, I reckon, in Descartes' favour, right? So back in the 1980s, Val, I don't know if you were around then.
I was not, no.
Right, but back in the 1980s,
I've heard a lot about it.
People would go on road trips, they would travel, and they would come back. And back then, there were these things called Kodak slides, right?
Yes.
They'd put them in the carousel. They'd invite the neighbours over. They'd invite the friends over. Share out some little patties, a few biscuits, some savouries, some snacks, a bit of beer, that kind of thing. Say, let us show you our slideshow of our holiday. Yeah. Right? And 2 hours later, 96 slides later, you'd be bored to tears.
And right? what did anyone learn?
Nothing.
Did anyone learn in that time?
The people don't know how to focus a camera properly. That's what they learn.
Exactly. And I mean, we've streamlined the whole, a bit of time has elapsed since the 1980s. We've streamlined the process. Now you just put all your photos up as you're traveling on your Instagram stories or whatever it is. People can look at them at their leisure, flip through them. They can look at weeks or months of your life in, 10 seconds, and they can skip what they want.
Exactly. But here's the point in Descartes' favour. Does he do a slideshow? Does he talk about his amazing experiences in Prague, in Heidelberg, in Neuburg, in Ulm? Does he talk about what a great soldier he is? No, he doesn't.
No.
He says, I came up with a method.
Here's my method.
4 points.
Maybe the method is his slideshow.
That's it.
Maybe that's what we're going to get. But before we get into the method, is he having an existential crisis? Because it doesn't sound like, I don't know.
He's got a valet. How can you have an existential crisis with a valet?
I don't know. I feel like maybe, the valet's not, a very good companion. Well, I don't know. Is he having an existential crisis? Because I don't know. I'm sure you may have talked to people in the course of over your life. I certainly have, of people having existential crises, and unfortunately, people have this idea that, oh, you study philosophy, you can help me solve my existential crises, and I'm like, no, I'm at best I can make it worse. That's all I'm giving you.
This is another point in his favour, because what does he do? He, in Hegel's terms, Descartes tarries with the negative.
Yeah.
He basically, and this is what I like about him, he's one of the few people who can actually take an existential crisis and say, all right, I'm going to live inside my existential crisis. I'm going to draw it out for 9 years.
Yep.
And I'm not going to solve it with all these cheap solutions like alcohol or partying or making heaps of money or trying to become famous or eating lots of very sugary donuts.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that.
Well, easy to say when you are already loaded,
Well, the inheritance helps.
Yes,
right?
it does.
But he stays with the crisis, right?
Yeah, he generates something out of the crisis, right? And I mean, we've couched this in kind of terms of an existential crisis, but is there a crisis of faith happening?
That's a deep question.
It's one of the most interesting questions that we can pose of Descartes is he even religious? Is he a Christian? Does he really believe in God? One we'll probably have to come back to at a different time, but
what kind of God as well?
What kind of God? If he does believe in God, what kind of God is it?
Is it a deceiving God? Or
is he an atheist and he's just using God as a concept?
Is he advancing masked?
Yes, the very classic. The great Georgian philosopher Mamardashvili makes a big point about, Descartes is advancing masks, in this kind of weird solitude. But so, okay, we've got to the end of this road trip. He set up shop. He goes, okay, I'm going to turn my extended existential crisis, a bit early for a midlife crisis, so we're going to turn this into a method, right? A method in 4 points. A method, rereading it again, which is so painfully obvious for us in the modern era, but quite radical, I suppose, at the time that he announces this as a method, right?
Yeah, I was waiting for this big revelation, this big surprise. And then when I read it, I kind of said, well, of course.
Yes.
But Val, my question is, do you, in your everyday life, always apply this method?
Oh, not even remotely close. I don't think I've ever applied this method in my day-to-day life. Even in my reflective life, sometimes I just go, because one of the things about this method in 4 points is he sets the bar incredibly high. Do not accept anything as true except that which is known certainly to be true, clear and distinct. And as you know from point one, as we know from reading this text, clear and distinct ideas, they are few and far between. I said it in class the other day. I said, who amongst you has had a clear and distinct idea today?
Recently.
No, I said I haven't. And
all right,
dead silence.
Okay.
Dead silence.
I am going to take that high bar, right? And as is my wont, I am going to lower it.
Yeah,
Val, I'm going to take it right down to the ground because, I like doing the limbo with roller skates and I can get under a low bar, right?
You're known for lowering your standards.
Low-hanging fruit, melons, low-hanging melons. I'm all about them, right? So let's say I got here today. Right? And I did not accept anything as true except what I knew certainly to be true clearly and distinctly. I knew that was a train I was getting on.
Yep.
I knew it went to Gare Saint-Lazare, right? And I knew that sooner or later, once I sat myself down in it, that the train would start.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sorry to tell you this, Ol, but that's just your British empiricism coming through.
What?
You only knew all of those things through your sense perceptions, which, as we're going to see, you can be deceived about. You think that you got on a train, you think that you arrived at Gare Saint-Lazare, you think that you're here talking to me now, but that is not a clear and distinct idea. Are you trying to tell me that you have never been mistaken? You've never gotten on the wrong train? Or you've never...
All I'm trying to say is if it's got wheels, if it's made out of metal, right, and it has a nice kind of rocking, swaying kind of motion, and I can read a book whilst I'm on it, then I'll call it a train.
That's the worst definition of a train I've ever heard in my life. You didn't even mention the rails. You didn't. I could have said that's a bus.
You have brought us a bus. You don't rock and sway on a bus. You get bumped all over the place. Rule number 2. Rule number 2. You brought us to rule number 2. Right. Divide problems into their constituent elements so as to resolve them. Right. How do I get to work? I thought to myself, how do I get to work? I thought, I can catch a train and then I can walk, or I can get another bus, or I can get on the metro. I do not like the metro. I do not like it, Val.
No.
Because it's absolutely stuffed full of people who are very anxious. It's do I want to be a sardine? No, I don't want to be a sardine.
It's a lot of hustle and bustle. People aren't looking where they're going. But is this... You're making an equivocation here between your problem of how do I get to work and Descartes' problem of how do I know anything whatsoever? What is the nature of reality? Is a little... I know you wanted to lower the bar a bit, but...
I'm right down there because I think in the end, I think that Rene is down there with me because he has a goal, right? He has a goal, His goal is true knowledge, right? I had a goal as well. I wanted to get here.
Get to work.
I had true knowledge about where work was. I didn't just go anywhere in Paris. I came to this very particular place, just to the south of the Seine. I found myself here. And in order to do that, do you know what I did, Val? I put my thoughts in order. Rule number 3. Right? Start with the simplest and easiest to know objects. That was my front door. I opened my front door, right?
Put your shoes on, work that out.
And I proceeded by degrees to the most composed objects.
Which is us sitting in this room.
With this complicated sound equipment.
Right now.
Yeah. Okay. That is composed.
Well, I feel that, this is a question of scale. You've drawn Descartes' method down to a very kind of pragmatic, how do I get to work question, not how do I know what the nature of the world is and how is it constituted, right? But again, to go back over these 4 points, they're very, very simple and self-evident, right, for us now. Do not accept anything as true unless you have a clear and distinct idea of it. Divide problems into their constituent elements, so basically break them down into their smallest bits, and then once you've got the problem down into the smallest bits and pieces, then you have to get them in the right order. Again, this is something that we do more or less, dare I say, spontaneously whenever a friend comes to you with a problem that they're having. Say they're having a problem in their dating life, right? They come to you with a problem. I'm having difficulty in my relationship. You go, all right, tell me what the story is. You break it down, and then you start putting it back in order to try and reconstitute the meaning of it, right?
Yeah, you start with the simplest and easiest to know object, which is your friend.
Exactly.
Should your friend be allowed to date in the first place?
No, probably not.
Exactly.
Usually the answer is no, but that's not what they want to hear. But you're going through this method with them. It's something that we use in our day-to-day lives all the time, which is what makes this so banal.
And then he just has, rule number 4, what is that? But to-do lists.
Yeah,
he says, carry out everywhere complete enumerations and general overviews.
Yeah. So, once you've done that, check it. Go through it. See if it all adds up.
Tick those boxes.
Do your arithmetic. Make sure it's all in the right order. If it adds up, then you're done.
Yeah, but what I like is the way that he explains this method, because he actually says he doesn't illustrate it with his everyday life. He illustrates it with geometry, right? And I've got this beautiful thing in French. Shall we do a little bit of French?
Shall we do? We shall look for a little bit of French. So in his explanation of the method, he says, c'est l'enchaîne des raisons toutes simples et faciles dont les géomètres ont coutume de se servir pour parvenir à leur leur plus difficile démonstration, m'avait donné l'occasion d'imaginer que toutes les choses qui peuvent tomber sous la connaissance des hommes entresuivent en même façon, et que, pourvu seulement qu'on s'abstine d'en recevoir aucune pour vrai qui ne le soit, et qu'on garde toujours l'ordre qu'il faut pour les déduire les unes des autres. Il n'y en peut avoir de si éloigné auquel enfin on parvienne, ni de si caché qu'on ne découvre. Et je ne fus pas beaucoup en peine de chercher par lequel il était bon de commencer, car je savais déjà que c'était par les plus simples et les plus aisés à connaître.
Well, thank you, Val, for the French lesson. For some of us who are not quite so fancy, let me read it out in the normal lingo. He explains, he says, those long chains composed of very simple and easy reasonings, which geometers customarily use to arrive at their most difficult demonstrations, had given me occasion to suppose that all the things which come within the scope of human knowledge are interconnected in the same way. And I thought that, provided we refrain from accepting anything as true which is not, and always keep to the order required for deducing one thing from another, there can be nothing too remote to be reached in the end, or too well hidden to be discovered. I had no great difficulty in deciding which things to begin with, for I knew already that it must be with the simplest and most easily known.
It was wonderful to hear it in the Queen's and not in this French, not in this French dialect. So, this doesn't even sound like a method that's supposed to apply to your own opinions, right?
No. It's he says he's inspired by geometry and by long mathematical, what they used to call when I was at school, Val, back in the 80s.
Yep.
Don't know if you were around then.
Again, no.
Back in the 80s, we had to do working out.
Yeah.
And we would be marked, not just on the result that we got, Val,
but
how good was our working out?
Oh, absolutely.
My working out was pretty good, I can tell you. Right?
I used to be quite crash hard at long division, and you have to...
They're not talking about bleeding long division here. Yeah. We're talking about calculus.
Easy.
This is what he invents.
Long division is the real... If you want to know that you have a firm handle on mathematics, long division,
No, that's arithmetic. That's not even mathematics. I'm not having that.
Oh.
So but the question is, seriously now, the question is, and I'm sure all of our listeners want to know immediately, okay, he develops this fabulous 4-step method.
Yeah.
He's inspired by geometry.
Yeah.
Right? Does he apply it? Where does he apply it?
Not at any point that I suppose, came across. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. Where does he apply it?
Well, he sort of claims to illustrate it because he slaps these 3 essays on when he publishes the Discourse on Method. Yeah. First of all, the last 3 chapters are like summaries of his scientific findings. So he explains the circulatory system. Yeah. There's a bit of analysis there.
Yeah.
Where are the veins? Where are the arteries? Oh, look at the heart. It's actually got 4 different ventricles. Yeah. He cuts up animals.
Yeah.
Val, he cuts up dead human beings, but he cuts them up to find out. So that's analysis.
Yeah, I suppose that is a bit of the analysis in the very confusing passages on the heart on the functioning of the heart in part 5 of the method. Yeah, I suppose that could be taken as,
Well, I like part 5 because I finally understood, Val, why it is that I have a pulse.
Well, there you go.
Before that, it was just an anomalous occurrence occurring within my body, and now I know why it happens.
It was just something that your body did and that you took for granted, and then Descartes comes in and he goes, I'm actually going to demonstrate this in this geometric kind of fashion, exactly how it works. But
we should not take our pulse for granted, Val.
No, absolutely not,
So he kind of illustrates it, right?
Yeah.
And then elsewhere, it seems that it only really applies if you really want to. And remember, Descartes is somebody who does things really and authentically, right?
Yes.
He's a genuine kind of guy. If you really want to apply it, you've got to be doing maths.
Yeah.
Right?
Effectively.
History, can I tell you a history? Can I write a history, right? Or an autobiography of Descartes, for example.
Yeah.
Can I write an autobiography and start off with something which I clearly and distinctly know for sure, right? To cite our president, for sure, for sure, to actually be true. I can't write a history, can I?
surely you have a clear and distinct idea of being born. That's the smallest possible unit.
I don't remember being born.
Don't need to remember.
I assume it happened. I didn't just fall out of a tree,
Well,
like an apple or a melon.
But I mean, this raises another interesting question. Is there a theory of history in Descartes' philosophy, right? How would you go about analyzing history in the way that, later Hegel would try and do it in this kind of rationalistic way? How would one even, what clear and distinct idea could you possibly have about history?
Well, I'm going to take a strong position right now on the history of philosophy.
Yep.
Right. There is no such thing as history.
All right.
In the 1600s. It doesn't exist.
No, it hasn't started yet.
You read your Spinoza, you read your Descartes, there is no history. With Leibniz, perhaps, he kind of erases history because he's got a theodicy, so everything's unfolding according to God's plan. Yeah. But that's another way of not looking at actual history. Yeah. So for me, like Descartes, but what he does have, he might not have a history, but he does have society.
Yes.
Right? Because the big question for him, right, he says, when he comes up with his method, he says, look, I think that if you look at houses or cities that have been built by a single architect, they are far superior to ones that have been built higgledy-piggledy like Sydney. He's basically saying, Val, that Canberra is superior to Sydney.
In many respects, I believe Canberra is superior to Sydney in terms
it's in a hollow.
In terms of its aesthetic general organisation. There's no traffic in Canberra. No,
that's because nobody lives there.
Exactly. It's a perfect city. It's a city without people.
That's right. Well, that's why. That's one reason why I'm sorry, Descartes. Anyway, he says. Yeah. He says, take a city. He says, take a political body like Sparta. Yeah. And it's a very strange thing. He says, sure, some of their customs and laws were a bit odd.
Bit strange,
like that exposure to the wolves when you're a young boy.
Yeah, right? or leaving babies with perceived deformities outside, or just chucking them off the cliff, It's,
right. But he says, nevertheless, the whole is perfect.
The whole is functional. Yeah.
Because Lycurgus, one man, right? This great founder, he's got a real fantasy here for founders. Yeah. He came up with the whole thing, so he wants to be the same. He wants to create his whole knowledge as an edifice, as a building. Yeah, right. And so he goes completely wild with these metaphors and these analogies. I don't even know if it's an allegory or a metaphor or what it is, because he starts off, he's constructing, and all of a sudden he says, "Oh, hang on, where am I going to live?" Yeah, right. I'm tearing down all of my previously held opinions, right? But he says, I'm going to have this strange thing. And nobody else in the history of philosophy has ever come up with this. He says, I'm going to have a provisional morality.
This is very interesting. But I do want to go back to this question of buildings and things like that, because, maybe I'm going to have to be a bit more severe with Rene at this point, where this is kind of great man of history kind of ideas. This is bourgeois individualism at its finest.
Oh, here we go again.
At its finest, right? I was thinking about this exact question on the way over here. Isn't this just, Ayn Rand and the Fountainhead absolutely loves this. You have this one great
You can't put Descartes next to Ayn Rand.
You have this, I'm going to today for the first time ever. You have a singular architect who supposedly designs this perfect, complete whole. Who builds the buildings? Oh, tell me that.
The architect. The
architect just designs something. Who? Tell me what actually produces
the bricky.
Yeah, exactly.
The sparky.
This is bourgeois individualism in Descartes' theory of architecture is pure bourgeois individualism.
He cannot handle a crowd.
No.
He doesn't like. Does he like people?
No. Well, he's retreated. He's gone.
How can you go on a road trip and not like people? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe it's because he went on the road trip and went, oh, actually, people are awful everywhere. Now I need to retreat. But again, this comes back to, why does he construct this provisional morality? He says that I'm going to cast everything into doubt. I've gone and looked across Europe. I've looked at all these different customs. I've come back. For me to be able to construct my system, what do I need to do? I need to accept all of the laws and institutions of the society that I am in. What's that about? What is that?
Look, I am going to leap to Rene's defense here, because I think he's onto something, right? I think he does need a provisional morality, right? He needs a morality because he is unleashing something very dangerous indeed.
Okay.
Which is the radical doubts, right? It's
Yeah.
skepticism. We know it's like caused ravages across the history of philosophy. All kinds of young philosophers have gone completely off the wall due to this skepticism, right? And what he cannot afford to do, he says, I'm going to cast into doubt all of my theoretical opinions.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know, he's a realist. He does need to eat. He does need to sleep.
I
he
thought
does
he had
need
his
to
valet
drink.
for that.
Yeah, but he's got to open his mouth, doesn't he?
Well,
right?
you know.
That's an action. Open your mouth. He's saying, open up. Here's
Yeah.
the spoon. Here's the train. It's coming in.
So you have to accept, So you have to accept that there are others around you that that you need to act amongst others to some extent. You cannot be the solo bourgeois individual that.
Well, I
just
suppose.
accuse them
I
of
mean,
being-
he doesn't actually. Of course, as before, like he doesn't mention the others. He says, "Lest I need a professional morality, lest I should remain indecisive in my actions, while reason obliged me to be so in my judgments." Right.
Yes.
So he's completely indecisive, going, "Oh,
Yeah.
maybe it's this way. Oh, maybe not." At a level of reason,
Yeah.
right? But a level of action, he's saying he's opening his mouth and pointing towards it and basically saying to his valet,
Yeah.
"Give me my porridge."
Yeah, shovel it in. Well, I mean, this becomes one of the. I suppose one of the questions that this asks is, why did he choose this particular society to set up shop? Right? Is it because it already accorded with his assumed beliefs that he received from his own education? So he picked somewhere that was the most compatible with all the foundations of knowledge that he already had.
This is a good question. I've been asking myself this. Are they Catholic or are they Protestant in Holland?
Yeah.
I think they're Protestant, aren't they?
Surely
It's-
they must
It's
be.
Northern Europe,
Yeah.
right? Origin of capitalism.
Yeah.
So
So
there he is. I reckon he sets up shop simply because he finds a nice cottage
Yeah.
with a stove.
he's gone on whatever was Airbnb at that time. He's found himself a nice little cottage, a nice little retreat. Going to keep burning through his inheritance money.
That's
And he
right.
goes, it's quite colonial if you could do that on European soil. It's like, it seems like the local customs are suitable to my own needs, right?
Look, you're welcome. You can colonize the Dutch if you want to, Val.
I
There's
don't
no
think
problem.
anyone's going to be complaining about that.
I went to Maastricht for a year. I tried to colonize the Dutch.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Didn't go so well. I got awful
Yeah.
brass bands.
Yeah, I went to Amsterdam for a few days and
Were you colonizing there?
No. Yes. I did not see the Spinoza statue while I was there, and I think I'm going to kick myself for the rest of
That
the
is
rest
a
of my
great shame.
days, because that obliges me to have to go back to Amsterdam.
Right, and then you can colonize them again.
Exactly.
I've got another question for you, Val.
All right.
So we know he needs some morality,
Yeah.
right? Because he still needs to do things, and in order to do things according to Descartes, you can't just do them by habit. You need a morality, right?
Right.
Why does he call this morality provisional? Is he going to come up with a complete morality later on?
Yeah. There are certain points in the various texts where he does kind of take this, I suppose, pragmatic, or maybe not a pragmatic approach to his philosophy, but he says, I'm trying to develop this method so that it can be more useful in the way that we conduct our lives. But no, does he have an ethics, or does he produce his own sort of morality? No, I mean, not, at least not in Discourse on the Method. There's no sort of...
There's no right or wrong.
There's no moral injunctions,
There are no rules about how to behave.
Not particularly, There's a bit about, like, is God good or evil? But, even that...
There's nothing about how to treat your valet.
No, absolutely. Of course he's going to leave that bit out.
So let's have a look at this provisional morality, right? I have formed for myself the resolution, Val, to spend the next week following this provisional morality to the letter.
Yeah.
Hopefully by the end of this week, I will still be married,
Yes.
right? But I am going to follow these 4 rules, right?
Yeah.
Number one. It says you must obey... he says I must obey the laws and customs of my country, holding constantly to the religion in which I had been instructed from my childhood. That's Protestantism for me, Church of England, C of E.
Yeah.
And governing myself, mind you, governing myself in all other matters according to the most moderate and least extreme opinions. The opinions commonly accepted in practice by the most sensible of those with whom I should have to live. What do you think about that? What is that? What is that as a rule?
Well, once more, just pure bourgeois individual conformism, right? obey the laws of my country, stay away from the rabble, the potential people who may disturb your system of knowledge so that you may construct it in your own kind of terms. Follow the religion in which I had been instructed in my childhood. What kind of person who is allegedly going to be calling everything into doubt, again, sets up this rule for a provisional morality where he says, I'm going to just accept the center of society, the most stable, I suppose, in his view, but the most moderate, least extreme opinions. It doesn't really seem like he's challenging anything or calling anything really into question.
Well, he's in Holland, all right. What if he'd been in like Salem before the witch trials, right? What if he was in a MAGA crowd right now?
He'd be
how's he going to find the most moderate opinion in a MAGA crowd?
Well, he's not going to. Well, he'd have to leave the crowd, right? He'd have to try and find a way out. And what if you live in, a moment of well, I mean, we can look back, it doesn't seem like he has much of a problem, traversing war-torn Europe and finding his own little place amongst the diverse crowds,
But this, for me, I mean, this whole first rule is subject to exactly the same problems as Aristotle's account of virtue as moderation, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically virtue is a mean between two extremes.
Yeah.
And that it's like the Overton window when it comes to acceptable political discourse in the public sphere.
Yeah.
It's completely determined by whoever happens to incarnate the extremes at that moment. So this is completely empirical and contingent, right?
Yeah.
If he just happens to meet somebody who's a screaming hard right winger, right?
Yeah.
And somebody else who's like just an economic rationalist and a normal right wing, like a liberal, then he's going to think that the middle is, the moderate position is going to be something around Le Pen.
Yeah.
It's
something
ridiculous.
Around between the two of them. And again, this goes back to what is he actually trying to call into doubt here, when all he's doing is following exactly this Aristotelian virtue ethics of moderation, the golden mean. He's just repeating one of the foundational principles that allegedly he's supposed to be trying to reject, that he received in his own university education.
Well,
right?
I've got an answer for you, Val.
Okay, all right.
He's wearing a mask.
He's wearing a mask. Yeah.
He is advancing with his mask on.
Yeah.
Have you been to Venice during the carnival, Val?
I've not had the pleasure, but I've seen photos. That's good enough.
Yeah.
I've not been.
Right. So let's move on. Second rule.
Yeah.
Right. Second rule: to be as firm and decisive in my actions as I could, and to follow even the most doubtful opinions once I had adopted them, with no less constancy than if they had been certain. He's lost in a forest.
He's lost in a forest. He goes, the only way to get out of this forest is walk in the straight line. What concerns me about this second rule is to follow even the most doubtful opinions. Going back to, your example of, the center-right economic rationalist and Le Pen, does that mean that he has to follow through the most questionable kind of political opinions that are existing around him at this time? Does he have to accept them and follow them through to their end?
Well, the criteria for him is if I adopt it,
yes,
then I have to go straight.
Yeah.
This is against wavering.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no oscillation there.
No indecision.
No.
Once you jump on your horse, you've got to ride your horse.
Yeah.
Right?
No matter where it's going.
Which means he's completely indifferent to what direction the horse is going.
Exactly. And so it all depends on the horse, Maybe this is where he's becoming more of a radical extremist. Maybe he's willing to follow through any kind of direction, so long as it's going in a straight line in some way.
He's saying, and also, metaphors, analogies, allegories, they're everything in this text, right? So you're in a forest, right? I don't know about you, but I have been lost in a forest.
I can't say I've ever had the pleasure. I've got a pretty good sense of direction.
Mate, you weren't up in the national park in Ku-ring-gai in the north of Sydney growing up like I was.
Yeah.
Right? You get turned around a couple of times. You haven't drunk enough.
Yeah.
You're water deprived.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sun. It's 40 degrees out.
Yeah.
You don't know which way the wind is blowing.
Yeah.
Marching in one direction and not varying.
Yeah.
I can tell you what, Val, that is not a good solution.
That's how you're going to... Well, I mean, we have exactly the same problem up in Queensland in Australia. You know, you get lost in a tropical rainforest. Try even walking in a straight line through that. You know?
This is not the tropics. This man has not been to the tropics.
And also easy for Descartes to say you're in Holland, completely flat, tiny, and it's a tiny country. You know, it'd take you maybe a couple of hours to walk across the whole thing. So you know, of course, that's a good way to get out of a forest when the forest is tiny.
But basically, he's saying he's saying, do not make any adjustments according to what actually happens. So you know, if anybody wants to set up Descartes as the great anti-empiricist, here's great evidence, because he's saying, I don't care what happens, right? The moss could be growing on that side of the tree or the other side of the tree. The wind could blow that way.
Totally
there could be a cliff. Doesn't matter if there's a cliff. Keep walking straight.
Follow it through to the end, right?
Who's judge? I mean, you know, who's looking at him? Like, what was the situation in which he was indecisive that he's trying to escape?
That is another great question. What is he running from? What is he running from, Ol?
I'm telling you what he's not running from, Val. Those Dutch sailors that tried to rob him and his valet.
Yes.
Because little did they know. They just thought he was some daft French bourgeois gentleman, right?
And they were
who
correct.
they could rob, right? And so he, because he's a light sleeper, right, dreams a lot, right?
Yeah.
He overheard them. And because, like a good student, and I just want to say this to all his listeners out there, he had done some language classes. He did have a little bit of Dutch.
Yeah, was able to, you know, fudge some Dutch by fusing it with German and French.
Right.
Yeah.
But he understood that they were planning to assault him and his valet, rob his purse, and throw him overboard.
Yeah.
So he leapt out, whipped his sword out of its scabbard, threatened them in his dodgy Flemish Dutch.
Yeah.
Right? And they were scared and said, all right, we're not going to rob you. That is decisive action.
That is decisive. That is decisive action. And I think maybe a timely reminder that we perhaps should be traveling with swords more regularly.
That's right.
Yeah. So, marching in a straight line.
So,
we're in the forest. We've been told to march in a straight line. Let's look at the third kind of rule. And he says, to try and master myself rather than fortune, and to change my desires rather than the order of the world. Again, social conformity. This is, I'm sorry to draw again the modern kind of equivocation. I feel like I'm being very harsh with Descartes right now, making him out to be a right-wing thinker. This is Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life.
what?
Yeah.
Look,
Don't change. Make sure that your own bedroom is in order before you try and clean the. It doesn't even. Peterson doesn't even get that far. He says, you know, clean your room. Make sure that your house is in order. And then once you've worked out.
Is that what you're going to tell people in Minneapolis right now?
Yeah.
Tidy your bedroom?
Oh, absolutely not.
No, I'm out there. I'm out there in the strike.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. This is why I'm trying to emphasize Descartes at his reactionary worst. You know, isn't this kind of like, I'm trying to remember what kind of even ideology is this? You know, it almost underpins, you know, like CBT kind of, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychology. You know, don't change the order of the world. Just change the way that you relate to it. Change your desires. You know, it's just you have a problem with your thinking. You know, just change the way that you think about it. Don't worry about the order of the world. You know.
But what does he do afterwards in his later career? He does nothing but fight for his new philosophy to be taught in the schools and thus to completely revolutionize the entire method of education across all of Europe. If that's not trying to change the order of the world, I don't know what is.
So, again, another example of he's given us a system of rules that he's not necessarily doing a very good job in following, right? He's going to go out and he is going to change the order of the world rather than his own desires, but only upon having established his system.
But he didn't get burnt at the stake, Val.
He didn't. He was not threatened with that.
He didn't have to recant his doctrines.
No.
Unlike Galileo. So the fourth rule, last but not least, he just says, I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing. What a great morality.
Yeah.
You know, he says, I'm going to review the various occupations which men have in this life.
Yeah.
We know he thinks they're all rubbish.
Yeah.
In order to try to choose the best. right?
Yeah.
That's back with the ancient Greeks. What is the good life?
Yeah.
It's always got to be, in the end, the philosopher's life, right?
Of course.
And then he says, I thought I could do no better than continue with the very one I was engaged in. There you go. I already know what the best life is. It's my life,
I'm
right?
already doing it.
And devote my whole life to cultivating my reason and advancing as far as I could in the knowledge of the truth.
Yeah.
What a great rule.
And a great rule. And a rule that I think, he would say that everyone should follow. This is not, I think this part of the rule is not provisional, right? This is a rule that he's going to continue in Discourse on the Method. He's going to talk about it again in Meditations on First Philosophy. He's trying to find a guide through which, and a method through which we can use our reason to advance our capacity to reason, not just rely on our senses, but that we have reason that we can direct and use in particular ways to advance.
So so you're saying this is no longer provisional, right? He's going to stick with this one.
I'm going to say Rule 4, I think, that's a rule that he's going to keep, and it's going to continue throughout some of his other works.
So how do we call? So the opposite of provisional, we're going to say this one's a stayer.
I reckon this is if he ever wrote his own ethics, I reckon that would be one of the rules in there.
Well, I'd just like to recommend to our listeners as well and ask them, do you not think it might be a good idea to cultivate your reason and advance as far as you can in the search for the knowledge of truth? Well, Val, I think in the end, we have to decide what's actually going on in these first three parts of the Discourse on Method.
Yeah.
Right?
So soon? We already have to make a decision?
Anything beautiful has to come to an end at a certain moment.
Yeah.
He's going through the 30 Years' War, right? Both sides are still so medieval for him. Catholics, Protestants, it's all substance. It's the Trinity. Is this little piece of bread, does it hide the body of God or not in it? Are you going to be absolved from your sins? Yeah. He's surrounded by absolute moralities, which are causing the most hideous war. Yeah. Germany loses a quarter of its male population in the 30 Years' War. A quarter. Yeah. Are slaughtered, right? Yeah. So it's a mess, right? He's advancing with a mask on. Yeah. What's he doing, Val, in the end? What's this all about?
What is his mind? In this particular sense, I think that there's a gesture of attempting to reconcile, and there's a certain sense in which, he's trying to reconcile this war-torn, I suppose, European continent that he's traversing. He's gone across on this road trip. He's seen the devastation and horror of what competing ideas can do, particularly competing religious ideas. He says, I want to chart a straight path through them, one that everyone can use to be able to lead a better, more reasonable life, right? I think that this is what he's trying to do. He's seen what the differences in opinions, what destruction that can lead to. How do we find a way out of this? And how do we find a common ground?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it's super important to keep two things in mind. One is that he is trying to strip himself of all of his previously held opinions, the ones that he's inherited from all of his teachers and his parents and so on. Yeah. And at the same time, he's going to have to adopt a provisional morality because he doesn't want to get caught up in these dogmatisms of the different religions, of the different crowns, of the different claims to territory on the part of the different principalities that are at war in Europe. So he's got to stay provisional, and that's why he's got to keep a mask on as well. Yes. I see him as a kind of a trickster. He's like one of those coyotes. Yeah. You know, like he's a trickster god. He's deceiving himself. We don't know really where he is because he can't commit yet.
No, he hasn't worked out what position he is going to occupy, right, at this particular junction, right? And he's trying to, reject or just not fall prey to all of these competing and very violent kind of dogmatisms at this particular time. And that is, I think, one of the very radical things about Descartes, not only in his own relationship to the education that he received particularly, institutional knowledge, all under the control of, all under the heavy influence of, this Aristotelian universe. But there's a very radical gesture in the fact that he is attempting to break with the past.
That's right.
He's trying to open a path for the future. There's a temporality in Descartes' work which I find very compelling, and it is predicated on this radical break and separation with the past.
He's trying to create himself as a subject.
Yeah.
Right? By this stripping down process, this subtraction.
Exactly. How do I find the most minimal unit through which I can rebuild not only a self, but a system on top of that, right? He's trying to find what is the minimal unit that I can work with, one that does not fall prey to all of the extreme opinions, all the systems of knowledge that it has assumed. How do I find that one little thing that can take me, that is not dependent on the past, but one that I can carry into the future?
So in this text, at least, which we know dates, it's kind of written over, throughout the road trip during the 1620s. Eventually it gets published in 1637. We know he's not yet found that minimal unit.
No.
He's not yet found, Archimedes' point,
No.
a lever from which he can shift the world. No. He's not found it yet, but he is inspired.
Yes.
So he has this overwhelming enthusiasm, Baillet tells us, and Genevieve Rodis Lewis tells us in their biographies of Descartes. He has this overwhelming enthusiasm on the night of the fever dream.
Yeah.
And it's for the mathematization of physics. And there's one thing that he has succeeded in doing when he writes his discourse on method, right? He hasn't found that one single unit, but he has done something. He's invented a new science, Val.
Exactly, yes.
And Val, can you tell me what the most beautiful thing in this world is?
A pure mathematical formula.
No, not a bleeding formula. The most beautiful thing in this world, Val, is a curve.
It is a curve indeed.
You point at anything that you want to call beautiful, and trust me, there'll be some kind of curve involved.
Oh, 100%. Some of the nicest instruments in this room here, curves.
Yeah, beautiful Gibson guitar there. Yeah, nice curves.
Yeah.
A wave on the beach.
A wave on the beach.
Sydney
Gorgeous.
Harbour Bridge, that's a curve.
Beautiful.
Mona Vale Beach, that's a curve.
Story Bridge, Brisbane, got a curve.
Don't even know about that bridge.
Yeah, you think the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Anyway, we won't.
So, you take a curve. Most beautiful thing in the world, always a curve. Right?
Always a curve.
And what can he do with his invention? Yeah. He can write it.
He can write it out.
He can write it out in a formula.
Yeah.
Any curve.
A perfect curve.
That's not bad, Val.
That's not bad. What is the early 30s at this point?
I wouldn't have minded inventing something like that in my early 30s.
Yeah.
After my gap year.
Still haven't invented anything. Well, to be fair to you, he had 9 years of a gap year. We had slightly less.
We'll get you a valet, Val, and then we'll sort it all out.
Oh, mate. Can't wait to go on my next road trip across Europe. Valet in hand this time.
Goodbye.
You've been wonderful listeners. Thank you. Goodbye.